Alrighty, so it is 3:01. So I'm gonna pass it over to Youlonda. And there you go.
All right. Well, hello everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen.
And just real quick while you're sharing your screen, if anyone has any questions, you can go ahead and put them in the chat and we'll be monitoring the chat. And then once Youlonda is finished with her presentation, we can then go through the chat questions so that way you don't have to remember them.
And are you able to see my screen?
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. All right. So I was asked to just kind of talk about the process that I went through on adapting visible body courseware here at TWU. So I'm going to be talking about that transition from the traditional lab manual for a lab course to all 100% electronic virtual resources, specifically using visible body courseware as our primary platform. So a little bit about TWU. We have 3 campuses. I'm here at Denton, which is our primary campus for undergrad, master's, and doctoral programs. And then we have Dallas and Houston campuses, which are primarily our nursing schools, PT and OT. Combined, we have approximately 15,000 students. We are the nation's largest university, primarily for women. We're a member of the Women's College Coalition. And specifically here at the Denton campus, we have a large subset of non-traditional students. So a lot of students that have come back from that workforce, students that are parents, and those students that are simultaneously working a full-time job plus taking courses. We also have a large number of students that are in that lower socioeconomic status bracket. So costs that we're passing on to students, whether it be textbooks or programs that we want them to purchase, are always evaluated before we adapt them. For TWU, our A&P program and courses are in the biology department. And most of our students are primarily nursing students. We didn't have a lot of our PT, OT, pre-med, pre-dent student classifications that are additionally taking A&P. And finally, we have some students from kinesiology, nutrition, and general educational biology that also come and take anatomy and physiology as electives. Here we separate lecture and lab, so they're completely separate courses. For our lectures, we have 7 different lecture faculties, and these are all taught in very large courses, 100 to 300 students, either online or in person. And then we have the labs. For our labs, we have 12 different instructors. It works out to be about 45 to 50 different lab sections, as we are limited by our physical space in the lab rooms. And they're either taught as hybrid courses, which we did this pre-COVID, and now that we have COVID, we started in the summer with online 100% courses, all of those being offered with 20 to 24 students per course. So each semester, we roughly average 900 to 1,000 students between A&P 1 and A&P 2 that we work with. And as of June 1st, I became the lab coordinator. Prior to that, I was a grad assistant that I taught, and then I was hired as an adjunct, and then the lab course assistant helping set up the labs. And now I'm the lab coordinator. And as the lab coordinator, I help construct the course content. So I have to collaborate with all of those 7 lecture faculty to make sure and ensure we're incorporating everything that they want us to reiterate in the lab from lecture. I help form the schedules, trying to make sure that lecture and lab align with content. And then I set up all of the learning management systems. We use Canvas and the learning platform. For us now, it's Visible Body. And again, we have 45 to 50 different labs. So I have to make sure and ensure we have consistency between each of these labs, so it doesn't matter which lab section the student is in, they're going to receive the same education regardless. So how did we get started with Visible Body? So as a student, when I was going through, we still had the hard textbook and the lab manual. I additionally wanted extra tools. So I went out and purchased my own computer programs with Atlas and David that I would use to help learn the material. So as I started teaching, I found that my students also needed additional tools. And over the years, of course, more apps became available. And Visible Body was one of those apps that I would suggest to students, like, this is a great app. Start, use this when you need that extra help. And last fall, I was still an adjunct, and I received a little email from Visible Body Courseware about information. Come check out Courseware. And so I actually followed up. And it just happened to be that the previous learning platform we were using was not working well at all for our needs, for our courses. It still had the rudimentary 2D images. There were multiple errors that we were finding that were very cumbersome to try to get corrected, and they wouldn't be corrected till the next semester. We were having numerous student technical issues that were ongoing throughout the semester, and it additionally came at another cost to the students in addition to their lab manuals. So we were kind of already in the background starting to look for a different platform when I received that additional email talking about Visible Body Courseware. So looking for that new learning platform, we wanted to make sure that it was something that we could really use. So I was able to set up a couple-week trial in the spring, and this was pre-COVID, that we would try out Visible Body, and specifically the courseware portion. And so we had a small group of students that we used it for those couple of weeks, and we had overwhelmingly great student feedback about Visible Body. And we actually had a little survey results. So I just selected a couple of these survey results to share with you. So this one is which statement best expresses the overall experience using Visible Body, and was overwhelmingly here in the green that they loved it. Outstanding tool for learning and understanding anatomy and physiology. Here in the blue, it was a very good tool for helping me learn and understand anatomy and physiology. They liked it a lot. And then this one is, it helped them learn and they liked it. So again, overwhelmingly, extremely positive. And then we had several questions where we asked them to compare Visible Body, which is in green, to our current platform and 2 other platforms that were also being put on trial, basically, during the spring. And for each of these questions where we had the students compare the platform, it was overwhelmingly Visible Body was the top forerunner. So easy use of the program, helping me learn difficult concepts, making the subject matter interesting and engaging, to mobile accessibility anywhere at any time, motivating me to study more. This was huge, trying to get increased student engagement in the labs, and overwhelmingly quality of that animation and artwork from those other platforms that were still only offering the 2D option. The last survey question that I included was looking at, if they were able to use Visible Body for their entire course. And the green here, I'm just going to go down in order to help me have fun and learning about anatomy and physiology. It would help me make it easier to visualize those anatomical structures and understand physiological processes. And it was these 2 that we got these survey results, and they were put into COVID where we had to be online. And so these students that were able to still visualize those 3D images reported back that this was huge for them, being forced online to have that option and that ability to visualize versus a 2D image only. So once we had the survey results, we took Visible Body and our other platforms and we compared them. And of course, price is one of the key factors. And although Visible Body, that initial price was higher, I pointed out that it was for 2 years. So we did have the students purchase them themselves, but with the 2-year purchase, it would cover our students for both AP1 and AP2 courses. And it also included those students that would have to repeat the course if they failed. It allowed for those 3D interactive images. And a huge thing for students was it included downloadable apps that could be used after the courseware. Whereas the other platforms, it was only going to be able to be used as long as they were in that one course. For the instructor, from my side, it was great because it had pre-made set of quizzes, outlines, lab activities, and they were available to use as is, or that I could edit them. And so overall, when we compared all of the 4 platforms to each other, Visible Body Courseware had the best fit for our needs. It had that online content, those 3D images. It had all of the additional tools that I needed as the instructor, from the preset quizzes, outlines, lab activities, and then for the students, those additional apps that were theirs for use even after they were finished with our courses. So what we did to bring it on board. So I started in this summer. Summer we offered online only course, and we still had at that point in time the lab manual in place. And in the fall we transitioned to Visible Body Courseware and Canvas material only. Going into this change, I had put forth the mindset for myself that everything did not have to be changed immediately or perfectly. Change within itself can be a very overwhelming task. And I was also simultaneously having to still teach, completing lab logistical duties and obligations, making sure all the orders were in place. I had instructors to teach all the labs, and of course, all the other faculty obligations. So within the transitioning process itself, the first thing I did was I worked with the Visible Body team, and they were wonderful to help set up a course template. So I was able to send them our past lab manual that we had been using, and they set up a course shell based on that to match up with my past lab manual. And at this time, I thought it was a wonderful time to try to make sure the lab and the lectures all meshed together. So I talked to our 7 lecture professors and got with them, got their syllabi, their schedules, and the textbooks that they were planning on using. And I went into Visible Body, and I found those pre-designed textbook correlations that match those that were going to be used for the lecture courses. Specifically for us, it was Tora, and then OpenStax. And so I took the pre-made course shell and those textbook correlations, and I started creating my own lab modules within Visible Body. So I combined the modules. I went and found guided notes, which were extremely helpful, that I wasn't having to start 100% from scratch. I looked at the Visible Body ebooks, the lab activities that were already published there, and the pre-published quizzes. And I looked at the different templates and kind of meshed them to match what I needed for the courses here at TWU. After I was able to formulate that, those 2 separate labs, one for AP1 and AP2, I set up the different chapters and modules. I set the quiz dates. I then copied and made a separate lab section for each individual lab. Again, with almost 50 labs, I had to make sure that there was continuity in the content between the lab sections. And as we were going through, we did find some material that Visible Body doesn't cover. So things like how to use a microscope for our dissections, how to do those, and chemical lab procedures. So wherever we had content that Visible Body did not cover, we added that information to Canvas for our students. Pardon me. So what our A&P courses look like is they can either be hybrid or online, and we set them up to where they have the exact same content, same syllabi, same due dates, and they use all of the same information. And specifically here in the fall, since COVID is still happening, this really helped us out because students were able to still keep up with coursework, even if they were out of class in their hybrid class due to being in COVID quarantine. Again, having those 3D models was huge for our students. For each content module or chapter, what it looked like for the student is they would go into Canvas first, and we had pre-recorded lecture introduction videos that we did for the lab. After they would watch that video, they would then go into Visible Body. They would complete and look over the Visible Body guided notes, and then go into the Visible Body courseware modules on A&P and Visible Body Atlas. Once they understood that information, most of the labs we had those pre-designed lab activities, we would have them complete either before or in class, and they would turn in their answers via Canvas. After they had their lab activities completed, we would have them do Visible Body quizzes, both dissection and multiple choice. And for this semester, we used the pre-designed quizzes that were available. And we set it up as unlimited time and attempts as a learning tool, and hopefully that those students would be able to actually learn the material. If they made a mistake, they would still be able to go back in and get those points. Again, any other lab content, dissections, equipment, how to use lab procedures for our chemical labs, we would then have posted it within Canvas, and they would actually complete those in lab or virtually online for those online students. After they had completed all those assignments, they would finally, for that chapter or that module, go in and take a Canvas quiz, and then ultimately the Canvas exam, where we had it timed as one attempt, and that was set as our evaluation and application of the learned material. Oh no. All right. So how the transition is going. So starting off, we had very minimal student issues. I only heard from 15 out of our almost a little over 900 students that had initial issues. Most of those were the student was not following the directions on which browser they should be using. And then a couple of those, they had not completed the Getting Started module, nor did they watch the video on how to use and navigate through Visible Body. So it was more student user error that was easily fixable. So we only had one student that had a technical issue, which was huge compared to what we've had in the past with other platforms. As we progressed through the fall semester, we're making notes on changes for the spring, some of it with the module content. So with the guided notes, those were a great stepping off point. So again, I was not having to start from an empty piece of paper. I had a guideline there. And so going through each module, we've made notes. Okay, we want to make sure we add this, or we can take this out and really make it more applicable to our needs here. We additionally have made notes for quiz content, whether we want to include more about a certain topic or a little less in depth on some others. And then we're remaking those lab lecture videos. So really incorporating more Visible Body animation into the lecture videos, because Visible Body is also new to our lab instructors and using. So we had a mid-semester survey, and from that mid-semester survey, student feedback was overwhelmingly positive for courseware. And students are really liking the images in 3D and that they're interactive. Our hybrid students are really enjoying the fact that they can have their cell phone or their tablet open and compare those 3D images that they have at home with the lab models or the dissections that we have here in lab. And I've also talked to a couple of our lecture professors, and they're having the students report to them that visible body is helping them within their lectures and explain that lecture material, which is huge that we're able to help from lab help their lecture grades. We have had very few complaints. There's still those few students that would prefer to have a hard copy of the lab manual. So for the spring, we're planning to make it a little more accessible to print those guided notes out for those students. Some of the questions, we're still getting them even this week, navigation through quizzes. And most of the time it's the students not reviewing how to move the models, or for the dissection quiz specifically, we're starting to ask some of those deeper structures and not remembering that they have to hide the superficial structures to see the deeper ones. And I've had a couple of students that, looking at the lab activities, stated that it was too many lab activities and they were too long. But again, it's something that we're looking at. So that is all that I'm going to have. I'm going to stop sharing.
So if anyone has any questions, they could either type them in the chat and we could unmute you so that you could ask Youlonda yourself in person. So if you want to raise your hand using the raise hand feature of Zoom, I could unmute you. So it does look like we have one question here. So I am going to allow this instructor to speak. So if you just go ahead and unmute yourself, you'll be able to speak right now.
Hello.
Hello, we can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Youlonda. It's so good to see you. This is Shom. We worked together at TW long back. Yeah. So when I looked at Ali's email that you are going to do this webinar, I was on for it. Yes, it was really a nice presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
And here's one thing, it's not a question, but just like pre-COVID, we worked on visible body, but now we have some like budget freezing or something, like we cannot go for new things. But yes, I think that visible body is really helpful because the trial period, we tried that and I really got very good student feedback for that. And sure, I will wait for like more information, and in future, I think we will work together. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Youlonda, and thanks, Visible Body team.
Yeah.
And Youlonda, where I can find your email address?
It should be linked there, but yfitzgerald@twu.edu.
Okay, sure. I will shoot you an email. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alrighty, and does anyone else have any other questions?
We did have a question from Eric Price, if you wanted to unmute him.
Sure thing. Alrighty, Eric, I just unmuted you.
All right, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Perfect.
All right. So I've been a big fan of visible body apps for a while, but haven't had a chance to actually put them into a course until this semester. So I'm working on converting our lab activities and using whatever I can to create a virtual lab. So I was wondering, first of all, I have a whole list of questions. My first question is, in your test runs or in the current offerings of your course, did you happen to see students preferring one of the apps over another, or do they just prefer the entire suite?
So for our students, most of them prefer A&P first, just because it's set up more like a textbook and it kind of helps guide them in the process. And then they kind of move into the Atlas app, and that the Atlas is what they're using more in the lab after they kind of have the background information a little bit more solidified. And they like the Atlas because of the augmented reality, especially in lab. So one of them will have their tablet up with augmented reality. sitting next to the model next to them.
So cool.
So for us, it's introductory level A&P. So it's primarily the A&P and the Atlas apps that my students are primarily using.
Awesome. Awesome. I'm a big fan of the Atlas app, so I was wondering how students liked it. My next
They're
question.
liking it.
Good. The next question is, I really appreciate your mindset about not having everything having to be perfectly changed and done immediately, because that's going to be my MO for a while. These changes I'm hoping to make, I'm wondering which activities, which resources were not available to you to use as a starting point. So which ones maybe took you the longest to get prepared and get created for your course?
So I can share, let me see if it'll let me go back and share kind of what share. Okay, so this is kind of what I started with. And I had the pre-made, like the course shell that they made for me, Visible Body team. And then I went and opened the OpenStax and the Tortora. And so when I look at this information, it has all the lab modules that are there. And it included, it's like a different one. It already had the module. So this are primarily A&P app and then the Atlas app on some of them. It had practice quizzes, graded quizzes, and lab activities. They were all there for me and available. And so I downloaded all of those and basically made my own course. I then had to go into Visible Body and I took out and grabbed the guided notes. Those, and again, they're a little more, most of them are geared more towards lecture instead of lab, but I took those and I copied them in. And so I copied them into the module that I made. And so I didn't really have to wait for any of either the guided notes modules. Those were all available for me to start putting in this summer is when I started setting this up. So it was all available for me. And again, I just started out with going, and even for the fall, what was already preset, kind of those set, whether it be the module, the quizzes, the lab activity, or the guided notes. And as we're progressing through this fall, we're making the notes and the changes that we want for the spring with that. Did that answer your question?
I think so. These tools are awesome for the skeletal system and muscular system and so on, but sometimes it's hard to find things for the endocrine system and systems like that. And so I was wondering, were there certain things you kind of had to create for yourself, and which ones you would recommend getting a jump on early?
So we some of those things that we had to add to Canvas is our application we look. So how to use a microscope, we still go over that. For the dissections, because we still have them doing dissections, Visible Body does not have the dissection of animals. So we had to go back and make those videos and make sure we had those assignments, because we also have online students, the assignment for our online students. We also do some chemical labs. So looking at like cell membrane transport, that applicable lab, digestion lab for chemical digestion. So we had to make sure that we allotted time before then we had to rewrite those procedures and that lab background information to put into Canvas. So Visible Body does a great job of the kind of A&P content, but we were kind of missing that. You mentioned endocrine system. So for that, it kind of also depends on how in depth you're going. Here, again, we're kind of an introductory level A&P course. So for us, the content that Visible Body had was enough. So it's one of those, as you're setting up your course, looking at those quizzes, the modules, is it in depth, or are you going to have to add some? And what we did is I'm lucky in that I do have some lab assistants in my GAs, and I have them working 2 weeks, at least 2 weeks ahead of time, going through, and they're the ones that are finding, hey, we need to add this, we need to add that. So it gives us time to make those changes before the students get to that section.
And the guided notes are in the instructor's resource folder. So if you're looking for those guided notes, that's where they are.
Awesome. I'm glad you mentioned the sections in chemistry labs. Did you order any kits for your students, or was this all done via kind of demo and maybe student interacting with questioning and stuff?
Yes, so we did not send anything home for the students to do. We have students not only in Texas, but actually outside of the US that are taking courses with us online. So we weren't going to have those shipping fees. So we did a demo module. So the instructor went through each process, videoed it. For those coming into class, they then had the actual reactants and everything set out on the table, so they were able to view those in person. And then for the online students, we had it actually still with the video, and then we had still pictures that they could match up with, you know, this would equate with carbohydrate digestion versus protein versus lipid. And they had to match up the reactants, reagents, and the products.
Excellent.
So that's what
Thank you.
how we handled that situation for right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I know I'm kind of hogging all the time, so I'll just be quiet for a bit and let other people ask.
You're good. The more questions, the merrier, right? So I think we do have another hand raised too. So I am going to allow that instructor to speak as well.
Okay. Hello, this is Dr. Mitra again. I have these questions for visible body team. And for a long time, I have taught ANP1 and ANP2 at TW. And now where I teach, this is a graduate level anatomy courses. So what I have felt with the trial period that visible body courseware could be very good solution for ANP1 and 2. But do you have any plan to have like more detailed anatomical structure like a graduate level? That's what I think we need some more work to make it fit for our institution.
Well, we do have it used all the way up through to medical schools.
Mm-hmm.
So in Human Anatomy Atlas, you can really go as deep into the material as you want, where A&P is more of a introductory A&P textbook level information. But Human Anatomy Atlas, you can go as detailed as the models get. And if there are particular views that you think that we should have that we don't have, let us know, because we are constantly refining our images to make them as detailed as they need to be.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, that would be really good. Thank you. And I guess some more clinical correlation, because our students are like they are in clinic. So we actually develop our course material keeping in mind that it has to be more clinically correlated.
Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely pass that on for more clinical correlated material.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I know I've opened a pathology app. So looking at that with some of my medical physiology, the other course that I teach. So
yes, the pathology app would be really good.
So that one has some neat things.
I think Zima also had a question, if I pronounced her name correctly.
Perfect. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. And so now you'll be able to unmute yourself and you'll be able to talk.
Hey, we have Nazima here. We have used visible body with ZSpace So our students were used to using those stylus and the 3D holograms. I'm just guessing the one that students will get is just an app, right? And probably a mobile app or like something attached to the LMS.
It depends. With Visible Body Courseware, they get access to the courseware platform that includes the quizzing and the assignments. And then they also get access to all 5 of our application programs. And they do get mobile downloads of each of those programs that they get to keep.
Mm-hmm. I'm familiar with one of your programs. I do not know if ZSpace gave us full access. Like, I mean, they had like just a basic software, or they had like all of your versions. So now that we are 100% online, we cannot use the equipment in the lab. So we were looking for options. And this, I mean, if this is, I'm familiar with what it can do for anatomy labs, but haven't investigated your other modules, which may have like some physiology labs or some virtual stuff that can be like adapted for ANP2 as well. So just need to explore. I mean, I'm not familiar with this but from your talk and from what Youlonda is talking about, uh, showing her canvas there and the modules that were developed, it looks like it's doable. And then the student testimonials too, right? Like they like it.
Mm-hmm.
So as long as it's user friendly, it's not like embedded in like many screens, and it works with like it's compatible with like many type of learning management systems. I mean, if it's compatible with Canvas, we use Blackboard, so it should work with Blackboard too, right?
Yes. We do have right now, we have single sign-on integration with Canvas, and we're working on developing that for Blackboard.
Mm-hmm.
But each of the assignments has a unique URL that you can put into Blackboard, and it will link the students out to the assignment.
Yeah, plus grade books can always be imported.
Right.
So it's I mean, it's not like a major issue. The major issue is the content and then how user friendly it is.
Well, I can have your rep reach out to you with a trial account, so you can get in and see all the programs.
Wonderful. Wonderful. That would be nice.
Okay.
Awesome. Any additional questions for us or for Youlonda? Any questions? So you could either put it in the chat. Oh, we have Eric. So I'm going to allow Eric to talk. There you go, Eric.
Hi there. So I get a little obsessive about certain details in AMP when I run across something that kind of like I think might be generating misconceptions or something. I get prickly about it. Have you run across anything in the apps that you thought maybe weren't something you wanted your students to see or to use as activities? And if so, how did you, I don't know, say these things are off limits, or how'd you direct them away from those things?
So when I was copying, it's basically like copying and importing from the kind of the shell class that Visible Body made for me, or from the Tour or the OpenStacks. When I went through, like there were a couple of modules that I was like, okay, that, we're not covering, all of the sliding filament theory, all of that background material in lab, that's going to be covered in lecture. So I didn't copy over all of the kind of nitty gritty components of the sliding filament theory. All I copied over was, the video. They have a great video showing the sliding filament theory in practice. So that's all I selected in there. So I helped do that kind of as I was forming my shells. as we've had students go through, we're in the nervous system currently. So there were some of the nerves that were a little more obscure. Again, we're entry level A&P. So they were included on this first set of quiz because I just used the preset one. And so that's where it's still included in their assignment, but I had it set up this semester that they have extra assignments. So it's basically bonus points. So it's not going to hurt them even if they had to take it 2 or 3 times and they're still missing that one. It's not going to hurt their grade. And I have a nice little list of notes of things like, okay, I need to go back into this quiz or this guided notes or this module, and I want to edit, take this out. If it's already been published, then we're setting it up to take place in the spring. If it's something that my TAs or my lab assistants find, and again, they're working at least 2 weeks ahead, then we can make that edit or that change before the students see it. And so that's kind of how we're working with it. Again, I had the mindset that, it wasn't going to be perfect, especially this first semester working with it. And so it's like, yes, we have those things that, okay, we want to change this. And so it's kind of a gradual thing that we're seeing. Or, something wasn't covered, we forgot to upload it to Canvas. So, it's like, okay, for the eye, we do eye dissection. So that's something that my lab assistants found, figured out this morning that we needed to get that uploaded to Canvas. So did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Is this shell pretty good at keeping everyone on track and keeping them from kind of getting lost and feeling like they're become overwhelmed with material?
Yes, and I have my instructors, they send out basically we start Monday morning. So when everything from last week was due and we start out a new week. And so we remind them, this should have been turned in this next week. This is what you should be working on. This is the due dates that are coming up for this next Monday. And we have it set up every week, and each module is set up in the same order that they go through, and it matches up with their syllabus, what they're seeing on Canvas, and what they're seeing in Visible Body. I made sure the names were the same for each of those that they were seeing. So having that consistency has really helped ensure that, everyone is completing all the tasks, all the assignments on time. We have just the handful and they're perpetually the late students turning in everything late each week. So, but overall, having it, they're keeping up with what the order that they're supposed to go through. And I set that up in the very first week lecture video that I made. This is the order that you need to go through. Make sure you follow these directions in this order, and it progresses through, their lecture video, introduction on Canvas, then the lab modules within Visible Body Courseware with the A&P, and then it goes to the Atlas, then the lab activities, then the Visible Body quiz, then they come back to Canvas, anything that wasn't covered in Visible Body, and then they finally take their assessments, their lab quiz, and their lab exam. And our grades have actually, I can't attribute it only to Visible Body because we're doing everything online, but we're getting B averages. We're normally on both exam 1 and exam 2, normally we were sitting at C averages. So we have seen an increase in the grades, which is, for us, it's great. And I did compare hybrid versus online course, and there's only 1 to 2 point difference between online versus hybrid. So
that's awesome. Quick question about D2L versus Canvas. Is the interface kind of more or less the same? It's for the team probably.
Yeah.
So you were talking about D2L?
Yeah, as opposed to Canvas being the interface.
So right now, I can't really speak up on D2L. I do know that within courseware, just like having the ability to like export the grades, that's kind of like the D2L model that we have, or we could export the grades as like a CSV for D2L. I can't really speak upon that. Rachel, do you have anything else to add?
Not except that D2L is on our list to eventually get single sign-on, which will afford a light level of integration. But I have not seen D2L, so I don't know how similar it is to Canvas.
All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Youlonda or for the team? Don't see any. Alrighty, so let's see, is there anything else you would like to show us within your courseware account or in your courseware?
Well, he was mentioning Canvas, so let me share screen. So this again was my courseware. And so this is just AMP1. And I had everything set up there. So you will note, like, I have VB1 through VB15. And then I have lab activity, VB3 graded quiz. And then this is my Canvas. And so what the students have them do, so each week they go into modules. And it has, we group them by 2 weeks because we're rotating groups A and B through the labs. So it tells them, you know, they're learning objectives, they're doing histology. So here they see that VB4. Okay, that's the module I have to go and complete with visible body. This is the lab 4. So those are those lab activities. Again, those are named, titled the same thing. Their next week's objectives, the video link to that, any additional information with those guided notes we put there. And then they had their visible body quiz and that, and then they would have the exam. So that's kind of how we had it set up. So kind of for Eric, kind of that's how we had it, and the students have been able to progress. They haven't lost track of something that was due. And again, their grades are showing that they're performing better than they used to.
Awesome, thank you for showing that. It's always good to see how another instructor is using it within their Canvas account and how it's set up, especially when going and creating a course. Any additional questions for Youlonda, for us?
Eric did have a question. He asked if the lecturers are using visible body in their lectures as well.
So I have one lecture instructor who's also actually teaching one of the labs for me this semester. So I know that she has integrated a couple of the Atlas images so she can rotate things in the lab. Most of the lecture professors were already set to use OpenStax for their classes. And so with OpenStax, they were using another platform for their questions. So that's what the kind of the route that they were already predetermined to take when we started making these changes the end of the spring going into the fall. So they have the ability to use them as they want, but I think it may be just the one, because she's also teaching the lab for me, that's kind of integrating with both of them. So some of the lecture professors have been teaching AMP for 30 plus years. So they're kind of set in their ways. They already had their presentations, and you know, they want to just kind of go with what they have. So
we do have a really good webinar on our YouTube channel. If you go to YouTube and look up visible body, one of our directors actually talks about how to lecture with Human Anatomy Atlas. So that might be a good resource if you're looking at how to use Atlas in a lecture format.
I do have a question for Youlonda. So how would you say that these instructors, the ones that have been teaching for like 30 plus years, how do you think that transition to online and using courseware has like been for them?
So the 30 plus year instructor, he's a lecture professor.
Oh, okay.
So he has not made that transition. For the other instructors, everyone, so I have 12 different lab instructors. Everyone has been gung-ho going after visible body. So there, there has its own little tweaks on how do I move the images around. So kind of learning through that. When we compared it to our prior learning platform, visible body is so much better than all the errors and issues we were having. So they're greatly appreciative of not having the 100 emails from students with technology issues every single week, or counting their quizzes wrong when it was right. So the instructors are extremely happy about that. I've only had a couple, Visible Body does a great job of reaching out to instructors, to set up either group or one-on-one times to go through and look at Visible Body. How do we use it? How do we set it up to try to troubleshoot those problems? So those instructors that needed that little extra push for technology-wise, I have a couple that are not as technologically savvy as others. So they, had a couple of little courses on how to use it so that they could better help the students use it. But they're really liking that. The only thing, having to download CVS file to upload the grades into Canvas, which is not a big deal because we were having to do that with the other system anyway. That was like the one thing that, like, if we could get it in the future that it automatically shoved it over, that would be great. But I mean, the instructors, the content, they're loving it. I have a couple of adjuncts that additionally teach at other universities. They don't use Visible Body with their students, but they, as the instructor, are able to use it in their lecturing to their other students. So they're liking it, being able to have that access.
Thank you for that feedback. So it looks like we do have another question from Eric. So I'm going to unmute you, Eric. It looks like you're asking about like TA help. So you could go ahead and speak that question.
Yeah, it's kind of like the question you asked before you step on the rickety bridge, or you're going to try and jump in and swim across the channel. Basically, I'm making an online AMP1 and an online AMP2 course, and I'm doing lecture and lab, and I'm really considering trying to ditch the lab manual and use Visible Body instead. But I'm doing this all by myself. So my question was, if you had no TAs to help you, what would you be kind of setting as your major priorities at the outset, kind of the big boulders to avoid or whatnot? That would be like swimming across the channel. Never mind.
So yes, if you have, I did it to where I just used the preset course and lab outlines and activities and uploaded those. I was able to catch a few things, and again, everything else going on additionally. And so, I don't know, it would be really I would have to designate more time to, making sure those lab activities were set up to where, okay, yes, this is what I want to make sure I'm covering in the lab, versus I had that luxury of being able to send it off to my TAs downstairs and be like, okay, here's what we used to do. Here's what's set now, help me edit it to what we need. So I think you would need that extra, if you don't have any help, I would say you would need to be like, 4 weeks ahead of when you plan to go over that activity to ensure that you have time to make those changes. But having that preset lab activity and those modules, those guided notes, has been a huge help, that I'm not having to start out from a blank slate. So, but I mean, we don't have the lab manual, and just making those additional content on Canvas. I mean, again, our students are performing well. They're performing well in lecture, is what I'm hearing from lecture instructors. So making that jump, it was scary, and but it's working.
Sounds like it's worth it.
Yeah.
It's
So,
definitely
and
worth
for
it.
the students, it's cost effective because they were the old lab manual. It was $100 lab manual for each class. So AMP1 was $100, AMP2 was $100. Then the other platform was $15. And they had to purchase that each semester they took it. And so having the visible body fee, that's saving them a lot of money. So, and they're only having to purchase that once because it's good for 2 years. So looking at the cost-effective way that because the students are having to purchase it, it's helping those lower SES students, especially, that they're saving some money there. And then they're getting the apps that they're able to keep even after they leave AMP course and go on to, hopefully, most of them nursing schools. So.
Yeah, we get a lot of pre-health. Pretty much everyone heading to nursing, medicine, and whatnot, pharmacy. Our classes are pretty big too. So I'm very glad you're teaching a 900 plus student class, because that's kind of what we teach. We're not quite there, but like 700s. Let's see. So for objectives, for labs and that sort of thing, if you feel like there's a clear list of those for yourself in designing these things, if you kind of target yourself toward those, you think that'll be a pretty good use of your time if you were kind of designing these labs on your own?
Yes. So I took we have learning objectives for the overall course, and then we had the learning objectives for each of the different chapters or modules. I combined the chapter modules with also what was going on in lecture, because previously lecture and lab classes really did not mesh very well in their content. So it was, again, as we're making the change, trying to bring them together a little bit better. And having both of those in place, I was able to, especially now we're in that editing mode, to go back and say, okay, this isn't as in depth as we want or need, or like some of those guided notes, okay, well, this is something that needs to be more in lecture. And so we're gonna nix this part and just put in the review video for the lab portion. And so really keeping that in place, because of course, anatomy and physiology can be extremely overwhelming because it is a lot of content. And so that's something for separating lecture from lab. Lab is a little more honed in on what we're looking at. And if you're doing both, then you can set it up that, okay, we're covering this portion in lecture. So in lab, this is what we're going to cover, and kind of make sure really marry lecture and lab even better.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Awesome. So we are just about 4 o'clock. If there are any additional questions, you could type those in the chat. We could unmute you. You could always raise your hand. And if not, I just thank everyone for attending today. And I thank you, Youlonda, for going through courseware, going through how you're using it. And this video will be posted. So I appreciate it, and I hope everyone has a great day.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Alrighty. Bye-bye.